Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we continue our retrospective on Frankenstein in film with the 1958 movie Revenge of Frankenstein. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire, and co-creator of Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy! Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, which, by the way, is the place where you can find every single one of our new episodes of this podcast, as well as at bleedingcool.com. He's the editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Yeah, hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, according to Wikipedia, Revenge of Frankenstein is a 1958 British horror film made by Hammer Films, directed by Terence Fisher. That's the guy who directed Dracula, or as we call it over here, Horror of Dracula. The film stars Peter Cushing, Francis Matthews, Michael Gwynn.
He's also the guy that directed the original Frankenstein. The original Curse of Frankenstein.
That's true. That's true. He was. Michael Gwynn, who plays the creature, and Eunice Gayson. It was a sequel to The Curse of Frankenstein, the studio's 1957 adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That is what we watched last week. If you haven't heard that episode, you should go listen to that episode. So let's get our opening thoughts on Revenge of Frankenstein. I'm excited to talk about this movie. Hammer Films give me reason to get up in the morning. Opening thoughts, Julia. Revenge of Frankenstein.
All right. Well, I liked a lot of things about the film. There were some things that I found truly disturbing and weird that I didn't so much care for. It's a little grotesque for me, especially given the era, because I'm used to some of the slasher films being gross, but this one was a little bit ill. But anyway, it was interesting. I thought that the acting by, I'm forgetting the person's name who plays Carl.
Gwynn.
What is his name?
Michael Gwynn.
Michael
You're talking about the
yeah.
monster?
He's really great. I'm really upset that IMDb, though, decided that he's the only one who deserves to be called Carl, because the cast list says Carl is Michael Gwynn. I'm like, well, what about the first Carl? First Carl should get some kind of nod, and then this should be Carl too. But anyway, he was a really interesting actor. I enjoyed him a lot. It was kind of fun with all the crazy bubbling colored water that apparently does nothing, because when they knock it all over and break everything, nothing happens at all. So I think it's just lots of different colors of water to look cool. So I don't know. There's some neat things. It's not my favorite, but I'm glad I watched it.
Outstanding. Tony, Revenge of Frankenstein. Have you seen this movie before?
After rewatching it, I don't think I had. Yeah, I don't know. Like, they do a bunch of interesting things, but I've been super busy. I watched it partially, and then finished it yesterday, and I have to say, it's not something I'll probably rewatch that often. I think they do a bunch of neat stuff, but it left me a lot colder than the first one. But I do think they did some really neat things with how the monster is portrayed and how it kind of dovetails from the earlier this is a sequel, so the earlier movie kind of how it dovetails into this. But I don't know. It didn't leave a really lasting impression, other than I was a little bored in some cases. But it is Hammer, and I'll always watch that. And so it was cool to see, but this isn't like a must-have or must-watch frequently movie, that's for sure.
Outstanding. All right, Mr. Drew, where do you land?
Well, I also I think I may have seen this one time before because there was like a few things I remembered about it vaguely, but I honestly don't think this one is one that I have seen at least very many times because I don't remember a whole lot about it. I do like Terrence Fisher a lot. He's actually one of my favorite horror movie directors, and he directed like most of what we think of being the best Hammers. He's the one that was behind he was the director of those. I feel like I'm kind of leaning towards Tony with this. I thought there was a lot of pacing problems. There is some interesting stuff that they drop out into this, and it's always fun to watch Peter Cushing play Baron Frankenstein. But there's like so many ideas. Like I think the monster is a lot better in this one than he is in Curse of Frankenstein. But they throw out ideas like cannibalism and things like that, and they don't really ever go anywhere with that. And I feel like the movie, unlike a lot of movies of this time period, it just sort of kind of meanders around until the very end and introduces yet another concept, which, is never actually mentioned in any of the sequels, which we'll get in there. I was also kind of disappointed that a movie called Revenge of Frankenstein features zero revenge.
Yeah.
There is no revenge being had. And there's people that survived the first one that he totally could have taken revenge on, and he didn't.
Yeah, that's super true.
Yeah. So I was thinking this is going to be like Frankenstein, going after his.
Yeah, you kind of want it to be Dr. Phibes.
Yeah, exactly. I was expecting it to be more like that.
Yeah, he's actually really sweet. He's really sweet for half the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, it, like Tony says, it is Hammer. I think I probably liked it a little more than him, but it's a fun movie. It's not great like Curse of Frankenstein is.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, I have to say, I am not the first person to say this, but I liked this movie. I felt like this movie was better than Curse of Frankenstein. I also believe, I'm pretty certain this is one of the first Hammer films I ever saw. But having said that, that wouldn't be the deciding factor for me. I mean, I remember it distinctly because the so-called twist at the very end of the movie, to the extent that it's a twist, I remember that from being a kid and seeing that and being thoroughly impressed that he could pull that off. But we'll get to that at the end. I love this movie in a way. It's almost a disappointing Frankenstein film because when you think about it, very little monstering goes on. In fact, a lot of it's just a lot of kind of practicing experimental medicine in the early Victorian ages skullduggery, and then eventually
he even has a volunteer for the brain, and everybody else is dead.
Yeah. But I having said that, I really enjoy that. It's so funny because we can list all these things where we're kind of disappointed in the various parts, and yet as a whole, I like this one a lot. And I think that's because if we think of this as just a kind of a series of a bunch of performances by Peter Cushing, I think this is a fascinating one because to start right into it, last we left Baron Frankenstein in the last film, which seemed to take who knows when. It said something like 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, so-called, and some people had said it was 1818, but that can't be right because that's just the year that around when the book came out. But
no, it said 18, in the thing it says 1860.
In this movie, it says 1860. So we have to assume that in the world of this movie, the previous movie just came out, that most of the movie took place like in 1859 or so. In other words, the, early Victorian period.
This is when they start to... I really do think, you talk about the Hammerscape, but this is the movie where they do really start to get into kind of the vagueness of time and place that
Yeah.
Universal had.
That's right. That one was distinctly, Switzerland, supposedly. This one is
Yes.
Switzerland, Germany, London. It's all kind of the same, and yeah. Um, but remember in Baron Frankenstein, the last movie, was a stone cold killer, charming occasionally, but a complete narcissist who was
Well,
capable
and
of.
he starts off Stone Cold Killer in this one too, because in order to escape the guillotine,
That's
he
true.
apparently killed a priest.
Right. So the last one, remember, he pushed the old man down the stairs just to get his brain. This one, he literally has bribed some people to cut the head off a priest in his place.
The priest
To have a
who's
priest.
supposed to be giving him his last rites.
Yeah. Well,
Well, if we were to follow the through line of the original movie, it's the priest. He just took his confession.
right. It's the priest that he told the whole story to. The whole story of the first movie that the priest didn't believe. So by the way, there's some major retconning going on in this movie, and I'm delighted by it. It's exactly what. Do you remember you were talking about in Son of Frankenstein? You were saying, look, Jason, back then, it's not like you could go like rent the old one right before you went to see the new one. So all the details are hazy. So the people making the movie are like, whatever, let's just go with whatever is useful to us in this picture. Same thing here. Um, a lot of details have changed. For instance, in this movie, it is assumed that people are aware that Frankenstein made a monster. Whereas in the last movie, at the end, people didn't know the monster existed. The It's also, as you pointed out, in the last movie, he spent the whole movie telling the priest this story so that the priest could share it with other people and I guess try to get his innocence. But according to this movie, that was all just Frankenstein biding his time because he actually intended for this priest to die all along. Oh,
Well,
and
Which
that case,
I can totally buy. He is that shady.
yeah.
Well, I don't know that he knew. He didn't
there.
necessarily know that would be the priest that was going to read him his last rites the new when it was time to be
who
hanged.
knows? I mean,
So
the
it
text
could be
does
that
not
he was
tell
just
us.
like, whatever priest happens to be there, kill that guy.
That's the text just gives us no. What were you saying, Tony?
Well, I mean, in that case, your revenge starts out
Yeah.
there, and
Yes.
then quickly.
I guess
it's
that's a
not
little
so
bit
much.
of revenge.
It's some
Yeah.
revenge. It's the revenge of Frankenstein, and then Frankenstein moves on to other things. Yes.
Well, he's got things to do outside of that. He made it out of the guillotine, and now he's got other things.
Well, he does
Other
give
monsters.
he does give a grave robber. He does give a grave robber a heart attack.
Oh my God,
That's pretty.
that
cool.
is so great. Yeah. Okay. Before we get to the grave robber, he's also
That
got
was so funny.
a new accomplice though. He's got this new accomplice is the one who like is there at the scaffold. The young that means that this new accomplice, this new assistant, Frankenstein has to have gotten that guy working for him, made his deal with him, like in the last couple days, because Frankenstein's been in prison, and in this movie, Frankenstein has he relocates, and that's why he has a new. Okay, all right. Anyway, yeah, Julia, explain to us what's the deal with the grave robber.
Oh, I just thought it was so funny that you got the two grave robbers. The one who is like, oh, I could use some help on this job, and the other guy's like, no, I'm not helping you, and he's like, bummer, because I don't know how I'm gonna spend all those 10 marks all by myself. He's like, what, 10 marks? And he's like, yeah, and so anyways, he finally gets him to quote unquote help when actually all the boss guy is doing is sitting there watching the poor other guy dig. Anyway, he finally digs up the grave, and he sees that it's the Baron Frankenstein's grave, and he says, oh, I've never seen a baron. So they open up the grave, and it's a beheaded priest. And they're like, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to get 10 marks to this body because there's no head. And then they look up, and there's Frankenstein. He's like, hi, I'm Baron Frankenstein. And the guy that was supposed to get 10 marks passes out into the grave. Dies of a heart attack and falls in the grave. And I just love that Frankenstein looks into the grave and just kind of looks down and looks up at his helper guy and kind of goes, eh.
Yeah, it's a
So
wonderful.
that's the Frankenstein from the last
and like,
movie.
nah, I didn't expect that, but it's cool, whatever.
That
So,
is definitely
hysterical.
Curse of Frankenstein, because he's just like, man, that is unfortunate. But wasn't it a good gag? So wasn't that pretty cool?
I would
like,
argue that he hasn't really changed that much.
No.
Yeah, but this in
I
particular,
suppose you're
man,
right.
like he's definitely like he could have gone, but he's decided like, dude, watch this. Hold my beer. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna scare somebody. I don't know who will show up. I think it's gonna be a graveyard probably, but wait till they get a load of me. Bah, Frankenstein. Oh man, I caused a heart attack? That's better than I thought. I just expected him to run away. Well, look, well, have fun in the grave with the beheaded priest guy I caused a heart attack. Hey, groupie, monster groupie, one of the first monster groupies, I assume. Hey, monster groupie, let's go start over. Do you like homeless people? Because we can do that. And he's like, sure. Let's go seek adventure and leave this. You know, like, not appalled at all. Not like, Frankenstein, I think you're a little out of control. I mean, that guy just had a heart attack. He was, nah, man, you know, I just helped you behead a priest, so I'm in for a penny and for a, pound.
Carl is kind of the Igor. I mean, he's
Yes,
definitely fulfilling the Igor role.
Yeah, they've
Yeah, but
created
he's
an
like-
Igor. And in fact, in some ways, they're borrowing elements from Universal because, we kind of think of those other films where Dr. Frankenstein has an erudite helper and a hunchback helper, and
Right.
here it's the same. But I do want to mention that same scene that you guys were just talking about when Baron Frankenstein first appears. It goes, "I am Baron Frankenstein." He looks so scary.
Oh,
He
no, it's
is
awesome.
a monster. He's like a straight up Dracula. I mean, he like just shows up in shadow wearing that amazing cloak that he wears, and he is very frightening.
How many times do you think you practiced that?
Oh yeah.
He's
in the mirror.
I'm Baron
You just stand there and
Frankenstein.
you
No, that's not.
kind of turn that handsome actor turn and just kind of like,
Carl, what do you think? I am Baron Frankenstein. No. Scarier. I'm Baron Frankenstein. Ooh, keep that one. That's the one. That'll give somebody a heart attack. Go with that.
So
it's like, should I raise my eyebrows or should I squint?
Yeah.
What should I do? Raise one eyebrow?
That's heart attack right there, Frankenstein.
That's
it,
Frankenstein. Man. Now, okay, a couple years go by, and we are now in the town of Carlsbrook. Now, by the way, Jimmy Sangster is the writer of this film, and I love Jimmy Sangster, but
somebody happens to be in one of your comics.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, actually, it's funny because, I used the character Sangster to be a senator character in sort of Dracula, and then to be one of the main badass super spies in the Alex Van Helsing book series is named Sangster. I mean, and he gets so many scenes by himself, he practically gets his own book series. I mean,
you might like him.
Yeah, no, I love him. I like Jimmy Sangster, but what I was going to complain about here is that it is weird that you've got two characters named Carl and the town they're in is called Carlsbrook. I mean, I think there's either means something or it's just, I don't know.
Well, the other town was Frankenstein, so apparently they just don't really care about thinking about me.
I heard you like Carl, so I put some Carls in your Carls for some Carls.
So, all right. Anyway, we find Dr. Frankenstein or Baron Frankenstein.
Doesn't Sangster work with Agent Salvaggio, or am I imagining?
He does indeed work with the ill-fated Agent Salvaggio.
Yeah, ill-fated Agent Salvaggio did better than the ill-fated Julia from your first book.
That's really sweet of you to mention.
It's all a hammerscape, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to review. I know. Apologies to those who have heard this before, but I'd like to review the fact that Jason killed off the character of Julia in his book, and then he re-released the book, and he says to me, "I didn't kill her this time, but I changed her name." I'm like, well, how does that help me at all? Either keep the name and don't kill her, Or change the name of Killer. I don't understand why
I thought it would be, my idea, it would be doubly uninsulting for me to no longer use your name
Nope.
and no longer kill the character. And
Julia,
I guess that,
for the rest of the podcast, we're calling you Carl. Your new name is Carl. You know, lawyer Carlsman.
Carly, how can I be Carly?
No, you must be Carl. Sorry, that's the way it goes.
All right then.
years later, we find Baron Frankenstein in the town of Carlsbrook, and he's now going cleverly disguised by the name of Stein. Although he is
Alucard, that would be perfect.
he is recognized by young Dr. Hans Kleve, who is part of this medical council that wants to kick his ass out of Carlsbrook. And what horrible shit is Dr. Stein up to? They don't know what he's up to. What they're upset about is that he's running a clinic for the poor that is very popular. That's what's amazing here, is that basically to the entire medical community, he is appalling because he's doing, by all accounts, a terrific job.
That's not what they were complaining about in the council. The council, they were mad because he was getting all their clients. I mean, it wasn't about the. I don't think they cared about the clinic. The clinic was just kind of like, whatever.
Welcome to 2016.
Well, I mean, let's be real.
2017.
That clinic is basically a body part farm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but he only does a little bit of that. It's sort of like it's like
Well, yeah, he's got to do a good job to keep the cover going. I don't actually think he cares.
It's hard for me to tell. I mean, I kind of feel like he has a noblesse oblige in the same way that he felt he needed to continue paying the allowance of his aunt. I think he feels like it's his job as a noble person to continue to heal.
Yeah, it's the Doctor Doom scruples.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
Like, you know, he wants to appear good, you know, to have these elements of being good, because that's what noble men have.
Yeah.
And I mean noble with a capital N. Like, he wants to appear noble. But deep down, I don't actually believe that that's a big a part of the fiber of his being. This is still a murderous psychopath.
No, it is. You're totally right. I mean,
like you said,
he straight up steals the arm of a pickpocket because he wants that arm. And he lies about it. And yet at the same time, he does a lot of good. And this is one of those things where if he's an evil person, if the Joker, in order to do one bad thing over the course of a year, ended up doing 364 really good things, it becomes complicated, because to a certain extent the Joker is doing a lot of good in the world, and that's what's going on with Baron Frankenstein.
Well,
he's basically
I think that's that Doctor Doom. That Doctor Doom thing. I mean, basically what you just described is the problem of Doctor Doom, because he's
the problem of a lot of stories. I mean, it's the kid in the cave, that the kid has to stay in the cave for the rest of the village to be.
But also, I mean, it does mark previous Dr. Frankenstein wouldn't have done any of that. He would have just he would have rolled homeless people and just taken their pieces.
That's true.
Like, there's no part of previous Frankenstein that would have been like, you know what, I'm going to heal some of these people. It would have been it would have been a lot more like Sweeney Todd. Like, come get help. Oh man, did I botch that surgery again? Guess there's some body parts for me.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he's really been converted.
There wouldn't be anything left of any homeless people, and the medical community would be like,
well, we never really got to see that, and there is this sort of weird contemptuous attitude towards the poor in this town. And I think Baron Frankenstein, and this is something we start to see in the sequels even more, Baron Frankenstein does like to thumb his nose at the conventions of society.
Yes, that's right. There's a certain like modern liberal aspect to him. Like, he's going to mix with the common man, even though he's still a snob. Right?
He's a rebel, and actually, it's funny. I always feel like Cushing's version of Frankenstein actually has a lot more in common with Dr. Pretorius than he does with the Colin Clive version of Frankenstein.
Yeah,
that's a trait carried over from Dr. Pretorius.
Well, it's also, I have to mention, this is also carried over from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where Dr. Jekyll had, he had the rich practice and also the poor practice. And the poor practice was kind of, to some extent, enabling him to cover up his crimes. And it is interesting, the sort of cynicism in a script like this, or wisdom, or whatever it is, where they're essentially saying that sometimes the rich do good things for bad reasons. I think there's a certain amount of that actually going on here. Is and that we need them. We nevertheless need the rich to do good things for us, even if we know that they're secretly also stealing from us and taking our body parts. I mean, it's complicated because he is not a good person. I'm not at all suggesting that he's a good person, and yet at times he seems capable of showing caring, such that you even forget.
He's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a great character to hang a series on, and
Yeah.
I can see why Cushing probably enjoyed coming back to this part again and again, because there is those layers there.
He's a million times more interesting than Colin Clive. And I mean no disrespect to Colin Clive, but there wasn't much there with him. But with this guy, there's a lot going on in
Well,
Barry Frankenstein.
I think Colin Clive is meant to be more sympathetic. I wouldn't say he's less interesting,
Yeah.
and he has a much more symbiotic relationship with his creature.
Yes.
Which is why I think they didn't even toy with the idea of bringing Christopher Lee back for this.
Right. No. The important thing is not the creature. It's definitely this complicated man at the
Well,
center
yeah, the
of the
creature's
story.
not even a creature. The creature's just a person.
Yeah.
That's,
Well,
that's had a
okay, so
brain.
let's talk a little bit about the setup that Frankenstein's got going on here. So he and his slightly paralyzed um assistant move to Carlsbrook, where they meet up with Dr. Kleva. But what they have here is they have the hospital, they have the rich clinic, the poor clinic, and they have a lab. And the lab is basically the same, very, very similar to the lab that he had prior. It's just a rented basement that he's got in some building somewhere. And it's a lot of the same materials. It's big beakers of liquid stuff. But he does have one machine on display that I find amazing. I mean, this is one of the science fiction elements of this movie. Uh, he's got a mechanical brain that he's built just to see if he can make a brain work. And this brain is basically in four parts. It's a brain, it's a vat with some eyes in it, so it's three parts: the brain, vat with some eyes in it, and an arm, and they're all wired together. And this is his demonstration of a brain: is that he can use fire, and the eyes will look at the. It's amazing. I mean, I have to tell you.
So he's got it hooked up so that the eyes see fire, and the brain processes that fire is dangerous, and the hand reacts away when he holds the flame.
Yeah.
In
the
front
hand
of
moves around.
The hand
hand
the eyes
becomes
see the
agitated.
flame, and the hand reacts. Yeah.
That's some crazy shit. That is like
cool.
really strange. I mean, seeing these eyes.
I would say it's glass free again, but I guess it's in a tank. So. But he's checked all the glass pieces out of it, so he's one up. He's one up from the previous one.
Well, he's made a mechanical brain. It won't take glass. You can't. You cannot damage this.
I had the thought of when at the end when what happens to Frankenstein happens to Frankenstein. I started laughing, thinking of Tony going, like his friend is like, I hope I can do right by you, and I hope I can do a good job. I'm like, I'll even take the glass out of your brain.
I won't put it in a sack and smash it, that's for sure.
Well, I don't know if they had glass. They might have had glass when they beat the crap out of him. Anyway.
Right.
The
fact
I
he
just
has
thought
this mechanical stuff is pretty rad.
Yeah, very, very strange stuff. But he's like, look, I've made a mechanical brain, and this is the extent of what it's capable of. Clearly, I cannot, with my hands, make anything so complicated as a human brain. To do that, I need a brain. And that was
the point he made. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. I mean, it's still true, by the way. Still completely true. So but luckily in this case, as you mentioned, he finds the way that Baron Frankenstein thrives in this universe is he finds lots of people who are willing to make deals with him because they want something that he can give them. Kleva is willing to look the other way about Frankenstein's crimes because Kleva wants to learn things from him. Carl 1 is willing to look the other way and help and murder priests and stuff because he wants, Frankenstein's, skills to help him. So there's always people who are willing to help out. There's even, I love the fact that you've got this guy who works for Frankenstein who, the Cockney dude who sweeps up and just makes trouble. Even he's willing to help out. I have a feeling that if Frankenstein knew what the guy was up to and just offered him money, the guy would have stopped interfering in all of his business. All right. So let's see. Where do we wind up? There's another plot, by the way, that is that we'll mention slightly, which is that Frankenstein is under a great deal of pressure from the good doctors of Carlsbrook, who have a council whose job it is to limit the number of doctors in town, basically, as we mentioned. And so they are trying to shut Frankenstein down. Frankenstein is not interested in working with them. But the sum of it is that the president of the council sends his daughter to work for Frankenstein, not as a spy. Frankenstein knows who she is, but this is the sort of détente that Frankenstein works out with the local government of doctors, is that he will allow this. He's going to give this girl a place in his clinic. That'll become important later when she ends up being the reason that everything goes wrong with this creature. So the basic plot of this movie is that Frankenstein is going to take the brain of the deformed Carl and put it into a new body that he has built. A big, beautiful body that is in the play that is performed by the actor.
You've been listening to Trump too much. Your language.
It's Michael Gwynn. No, I mean he's
It's
tall and he's
huge.
beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
going to be huge.
It's huge,
Big
beautiful, very, very beautiful, huge body.
Bigly.
Michael Gwynn is.
We better be careful with this. We don't want them to say bad things about our podcast on Twitter.
No.
I would kill to have Donald Trump call us out. He could say anything he want.
Apologize, Drew.
Can you imagine the
Apologize.
attention that you would get?
Never!
I don't want that kind of attention.
If the president-elect chose to single out your podcast, that would be
okay. I'm happy not to have that kind of attention.
all right. Well, anyway, they decide to do the surgery. They put Carl's brain into the body of Michael Gwynn, and it's not. I mean, it's played by Michael Gwynn. It's actually a body put together from a lot of parts, and that's going to be fine. And here's the amazing thing. Frankenstein in this movie, all right, I don't know what happens in the next movies, I can't remember, but in this movie, Frankenstein has his process down. He has it down. He gets that brain into the new body. He's like, the only thing that can screw this up is if that brain gets damaged. He's learned his lesson.
He tried it on a baboon. He put a baboon's brain into a chimpanzee's body.
But he put an orangutan.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right.
Orangutan's brain into a chimpanzee's body, and
Yeah.
then when the brain got damaged somehow or through shock, he became the chimpanzee became a cannibal and ate its mate.
Oh, is that what it was? I missed that part. I just
Yeah.
thought that he was a meat eater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Then he
the
put
universe.
that into a cannibal body, and that cannibal became a vegetarian.
Nice.
Well, I mean, there's an old.
It's crazy. This world we live in.
Welcome to
Frankenstein's
chimpanzees
America.
traditionally don't eat meat. Although I don't know if that's strictly true, but it doesn't matter. In the universe of this, chimpanzees don't eat meat, but after this brain receives some damage, the chimpanzee started acting aberrantly. In this case, becoming a cannibal. And once again, this is where Frankenstein, who is a genius, also shows off his lazy side. Because Clave is like, well, wait, isn't that kind of a problem? And he's like, it's okay. It's all right. It didn't.
I just think it's amazing that Frankenstein's able to do a brain transplant and have it work completely perfectly. It's crazy.
Yeah. No.
Well, for all of his terribleness, like, he is a really good monster scientist.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
as far as monster scientists go, this guy is top of the game. Hands down,
I mean,
he can do all this. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, this everything that goes wrong in this movie with Carl is not actually his fault.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
If people had just followed his orders to the letter, everything would have been fine.
And see,
and that's what Frankenstein's bad at.
Working in tech,
he's terrible at recognizing
I can totally
the flaws in people.
Understand this. What did you? Hey, I did this. What did you do to your computer? Well, nothing. Well, except this. I did this. Is that bad? Well, yeah, that's really bad. Well, I don't know who told you. I just thought I could do that. So in this case, for all of his flaws, in this case, I can understand.
Commiserate. Identify.
I can commiserate that is in fact a lot of times what happens. We told you to do this. Did you read that email? No. Okay. Well, now we deal with that. Luckily, mostly I don't have to deal with monsters, and that's good.
Mostly.
I mean, like I say, his process works perfectly. He's got the brain in, and he's like, okay, Carl 2 is now alive. Keep him strapped down because he might be given to, sudden crazy motions that could result in his injury. He needs to be perfectly still. Just like a lot of surgeries in the United States, you'd have to keep your head completely still while you recovered from this thing.
He needs one of those cones of shame that the dogs have.
Yes, yeah. Well, what he doesn't need is the candy striper to come in and talk to the monster, who goes, oh, well, would you please loosen my straps? And the monster, of course, I call him the monster. He's actually just the perfectly lovely Michael Gwynn, and Gwen is like, yeah, and Gwen doesn't want to. Carl too doesn't want to be put on display, so he's plotting his escape. And when the candy striper comes in, he says, "Oh, well, would you loosen these bonds? They hurt." And then the moment she leaves, he unstraps himself and runs away. It's as simple as that. And then Frankenstein's problems. And Frankenstein knows exactly what it is. Here's the great thing: as much as we talked about him being a narcissist who is constantly disappointed by people, he nevertheless understands them pretty well. He knew that if you told Carl that they were going to put his body on display, that Carl would get upset, and that was the dumbass mistake that Dr. Kleva makes. That was why Carl wanted to get away. Anyway, next comes a pretty scary moment. There's not a lot of horror in this movie. I think this is one of the problems of this film. It's almost more a science fiction movie than a horror movie. But kind of scary moment because Carl 2 goes back to the lab. He's doing that because he wants to burn his original body. And when he's there, the night watchman, the guy who guards the house, whatever the hell he is, the janitor of the building, finds him, takes him for a burglar, and beats the shit out of him with furniture. And
that guy was a sadistic ass. He was so mean. He just got so much joy in causing this guy pain for no reason.
It is. It's truly horrible, especially because Carl says, "Please don't hit me." You feel terrible for him. You feel
I think
awful.
That's one of the most interesting things about this movie is the monster is, we've kind of eschewed the whole idea of him being monstrous, other than, he's really tall, but he's, scars aside, no worse than anybody who's come out of an accident.
Yeah.
He certainly is the antithesis of the previous monster from the previous film. This is a person who's, has some unfortunate stuff. I mean, mainly the scarring and everything that would be caused from him being kind of put back together. But I think it's really interesting that he made kind of where he's been headed. You know, this person is not monstrous in the same sense that the other Frankenstein monsters have been up until this point. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about this particular quote-unquote monster.
Yeah.
Well, he's just sort of pitiable because he doesn't want to be put on display.
No, of course. Yeah. It's like, but he in a lot of cases he would be exactly what Frankenstein has been building to. You know, that he's not hideous. He's not. I mean, he's pitiable, but he could show. You know, this is a friend. Like, look what I did. He would not be ashamed, and people wouldn't draw back immediately in horror once, you know, we assume that he's healed up and everything, like how he would be by that time. I think that was one of the most interesting things about this particular monster, and I thought it was a you know, quite a different take.
Mm-hmm.
What was Frankenstein's big plan? Was he planning to come back out as Frankenstein and hope that everybody just forgot about all the murdering and stuff?
I think
or was
maybe.
he going to allow
so.
this new persona to take the credit for doing, you know, the work that Frankenstein had done?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Dr. Stein was going to take credit for it all. It's very possible that he was going to make himself known. Dr. Stein with his with his brain transplant, and everybody would be happy. It's very possible.
I'm seeing a like a you know, Law and Order style moment, or what's his name, Perry Mason style moment, where they're like, oh, you know, too bad that the original, you know, Dr. Frankenstein couldn't have accomplished this, and that he failed and he died, and he's just like, no, I'm Dr. Frankenstein.
I'm Dr. Frankenstein.
When he reveals it, he's like, oh man, if you just shut up. He's like, oh man, why did I?
You can't handle the truth.
That was me. That was me.
But you're exactly right, Tony. I mean, that's what I'm saying. He has his process completely down. In this movie, again, I don't remember how it continues in the next films, but at least here, he seems to have reached a point where he could keep perfecting, and he's able to make artificial people. Just straight up. It's I'm sorry. He's able to make rebuilt people, and that's pretty amazing. And we're going to get to the amazing one that he does at the end. But anyway, it all is undone by a brain damage once again, because the world of Baron Frankenstein, has a very, very dangerous and angry god at the top of it that just screws with Baron Frankenstein all the time.
Well,
and in this case,
I mean,
go ahead.
Deservedly so.
Sure.
I mean, this is we've seen the previous movie, and we've seen him like, well, I gave that guy a heart attack, and by the way, here's my cannibal chimp. So
the beheaded priest that I had replaced.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sympathize. Like, oh man, you know, his plans never work out. Yeah, except most of his plans have a touch of megalomania, egotism, and narcissism. Like you kind of like maybe the world's trying to right itself, less than like, oh man, poor Frankenstein. That poor beheading narcissist who creates monsters and does bad things and locks his maid / future, you know,
the mother of his child,
mother of his child in with the monster. Man, that poor guy just can't get a break.
You're right.
It's hard for me to feel too bad.
Like karma, like the Frankenstein universe has karma at its center, and Baron Frankenstein constantly. Yeah. Go ahead, Joy.
You know, if there is karma, there's also got to be, if we're talking, you know, the supernatural kind of stuff, there's got to be a devil who's like, by the way, he gets to come back. Check this out.
Yes.
Like, there's some other force that wants a Frankenstein around, despite this other rectifying force that keeps trying to be like, we can't have this. This can't stand. I mean, look at this.
Yeah, box office. I think you're right. So Carl 2 got his brain bashed, and one thing that it did is it starts to somehow awaken damage that was there before, so that he starts, not only does he have kind of a cannibalistic attacking urge, but he also starts to reproduce the injuries that he bore in his
Oh, and
previous
that's
body.
terrifying and sad. Like
It
that part,
is.
those parts were just grueling in a way that even the parts that have Frankenstein has a hand in are less
Yeah.
grueling in some ways. Terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, because everything was going right. In other words, well, I mean, again, look, Carl I, also a murderer. Nevertheless,
Yeah, that's
you're
true.
you're you're made to sort of feel for him. There's something pitiable about him, and watching him fall apart like that is really rough. He breaks in to a swell party at the end, and in front of everybody shouts Frankenstein's name. And so the jig is up. Dr. Kleva, who, like Paul in the last movie, has some sort of bizarre man crush on Baron Frankenstein that makes him want to help Frankenstein get away. Dr. Kleva is like, you need to head for other parts of the Hammerscape because, these people around here know who you are. And Frankenstein doesn't move fast enough. I don't know what he thinks is going to happen, but he sticks around long enough for word to get back to all of his clinic patients who, no gentlemen, they just sort of basically tear him apart. I mean, they stomp him to death. Just,
Well, you kind of gotta. I mean, once you find out that this dude's been taking parts of your buddies,
oh yeah,
there's a certain comeuppance to like. There's your revenge, Drew.
yeah. It's revenge on Frankenstein.
On Frankenstein. Yeah, Revenge on Frankenstein. That was the title that
Yeah,
they scrapped.
they just messed up their prepositions.
Yes.
In their naming it.
So Frankenstein is on his deathbed. The gendarme are at the door, and Dr. Kleva has received orders from Frankenstein. You know what you need to do. And so Dr. Kleva, who's watched one of these procedures before, does the patented Frankenstein process, and it is a stellar success. Like perfect success, because Frankenstein, by the way, has another body. I think we mentioned that he has, and
he has a body that he has
it,
made look like him.
yeah, with some stitching and stuff, so that it looks like Peter Cushing. And so when we next meet him,
Except with that awesome arm tattoo.
with the tattoo, we can recognize the body because he has the tattoo, because he took it from a pickpocket, meaning fine hands.
Right.
So he can keep being a surgeon. He has built for himself a super body. Now here's a question. Do you think that he was planning this body for himself?
Well, yeah,
I think
obviously, he wouldn't have made it look like himself if he
Guess
had
so. That's so
I think
weird.
if you're a master monster person, like, why wouldn't you keep a body on hand?
Yeah. It's kind of amazing.
If you know you can, like, do that,
yeah.
you can,
Yeah.
if you know you can do it, like, you're going to keep it.
I suspect that they're never going to come back to this level of... I have vague memories that the level of, like, perfection that Baron Frankenstein has reached in this movie, to be able to just, like, plop brains around, make new bodies, I don't think they're ever going to reach this again.
Well, what troubles me a little bit about this is that, okay, so now Frankenstein has become the monster. He's both Baron Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of awesome when you think about it.
Yeah.
But
Mind
this
blown,
is
Drew.
never brought... What now?
Mind blown.
Yes.
My mind is blown.
Thank you. I have my moments. That's why you keep me around. But this is never brought up again in any of the other sequels, and that kind of makes me sad, because I think this is such a profound idea and such an interesting idea. And I wish they hadn't dropped it.
I hate to get into the other movies, but one thing I do remember is that in one of the future movies, because these movies do have continuity, Frankenstein receives terrible burns on his hands, and then in the following movie, he needs somebody else to help him with the surgery because he doesn't have good hands. Well, what happened to his patented Frankenstein process, where he could like plop his brain into a new body? I mean, what?
Or just
And
chop those hands off and put on some new ones.
yeah,
Right.
sure.
Maybe
Yeah.
he didn't
Yeah,
have a helper to
obviously
do
he's
the
got
hand.
like he's got
Yeah.
the nerve work down. So
Maybe
Yeah.
he just didn't have a helper
Yeah.
to do hand stuff.
And we'll have to watch and find out. Or maybe he goes straight downhill. I mean, maybe it's possible that he's going to start going insane. And
every time he asks a helper to help him with a hand job, they're like, no, I mean, it's surgery. Oh, this is terrible.
Well,
I can't convince anybody to do this hand job.
He needs to train a woman. He needs to train a woman to do, or a gay guy. They'll be like, wait, that's what you meant?
oh,
Hey,
you're hurting
what do you
me.
mean? What do you mean, Julia? I was talking about surgery. I don't. Why are you laughing?
All right. At the end of this film, we are now in London. Yet another like 3 years before, so it's now like somewhere around 1866. 1866. I mean, towards the end of the 19th century, and we're getting up towards Dracula time. Okay, and like 15 or so years out, and he's he's started yet again. He's now calling himself Dr. Frank.
Of course. Oh man, I wonder, can he, like in the next movie, can he be called Saint Ein? Just so we can just have every permutation.
It's like he's such a narcissist that he wants people to suss him out. And look, when Paul Kleva, or whatever his name is, when Dr. Kleva comes to him and goes, "Hey, you're that brilliant Dr. Frankenstein, aren't you?" He's like, "Yes, I am." He doesn't even really...
He kind of toys with him a little bit, but not much.
Right?
And I love actually that's my favorite scene.
Good.
That is my favorite
like,
scene in the whole movie.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like, well, if I am, what would you do? Like, what would you do if it was me? What would you think about that? And then he's like, I think that was the coolest thing ever. He's like, then that's me. Totally.
Yeah. Well, he's narcissist. Like he follows through with his how he believes. I'm waiting for the part where they're like, "Hey, this is the new guy in town, Mr. Nicenar," and then like he's an Alucard castle, and then they were like, "Oh no, if they're foiled by mirrors again." Yeah, that's it's undoing. Mr. Nicenar, how do we never find this?
I have to
Alucard
say,
castle.
there is there's a comic book, by the way, called Flesh and Blood by Robert Tennell and Neil Vokes, and it has several characters who are made to look like Peter Cushing, because it's an unlicensed, but it's the Hammer world. So you've got like the Peter Cushing version of Baron Frankenstein and the Peter Cushing version of Van Helsing, and they occupy the same.
Van Helsing is like his. They have young Van Helsing that's like his, like Frankenstein's, like he's his psychiatrist actually,
right,
while he's in prison.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the ages are different, such that the characters don't have to look the same, but it's essentially very much the same sort of characters. So that you've got,
Well, they
you
also
definitely
have a very Christopher Lee looking Dracula, and a character that's both the Wolfman and Captain Kronos at the same time.
Oh, just amazing stuff. Yeah. So I don't mean to get off on it. I just want to say that,
No, it's a good series. It's worth plugging.
Yeah.
So Jason, I just saw the mouse that you've been seeing run across the
What did you really?
floor. I'm a little freaked out right now. Like,
so Drew, and this is again random. Apologies to sidetracking. Has there been a werewolf Van Helsing?
Well, yeah, there has been a werewolf Van Helsing. We all know that.
In the movie.
That was in Van Helsing.
You mean besides Van Helsing?
Man, I've tried to block that out.
You were just asking just for the hell of it? Has there been a werewolf?
I was thinking about the whole thing and what you were talking about and werewolves and Van Helsing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Sure.
Oh damn that movie.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it happened. It was there.
I do want to mention.
Too bad it's in that movie.
Yeah. And we did actually do that movie. I mean, if you want to listen to our
again,
covered...
that's why I don't remember it. It's because every fiber of time and space my localized time and space tries to close that out.
This is a tangent, but I think there is a natural inclination to want to make the Wolfman the enemy of Dracula, because he's kind of the monster of the people, and Dracula is 100% blue blood.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
The vampire elite, as it would.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to mention a little bit about, Drew talked about the Hammerscape, which is our word for this Hammer universe with its rules. And it's funny because this film, I always forget how early in the Gothic Hammer series this really is, because, there's Curse of Frankenstein, Dracula, and this one come out more or less almost simultaneously. They're very much contemporary to one another. They're both 1958. Revenge of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula are, and so that color scheme is being, developed so that the way these films look, it's amazing to me how defined the look of Hammer horror becomes as early as this. That blood that Tony's referenced before, that blood that is like tempera blood, it's very, very bright. There's purple everywhere. Basically, if you were to draw a color chromatic of Revenge of Frankenstein, mauve would make up most of it. And then with a few other colors that involve blue and red. It is such a designed world. It's really gorgeous. I mean, I think it's really neat. There's not even a lot of burgundy. And then if you think about think forward to other Hammer films that we've done from the late period, like Twins of Evil and stuff like that, there you're seeing a lot of dark blues and burgundies and stuff like that. But at this point, with Curse and Dracula and stuff like that, everything is really soft, pale purple, pale blue. All of these colors. It's gorgeous stuff. I'm amazed at what this thing looks like. It is so far from the Universal pictures, which again are only a decade earlier, that it blows my mind. Anyway,
when they decided to embrace color, man, they went for it. And that's awesome.
Well, and that was
Julie also talked about how this movie is kind of grosser than what she was expecting. I mean, Hammer really pioneered the gore horror film.
The brain in the vat thing, where he's not in a Descartes kind of way, but in a literal brain vat way. That's nasty. The whole cannibalism thing is just, a little creepy. The arm, I
love that. I love that stuff. I love that stuff, though. I love the salaciousness of it, and the sort of. It doesn't have the elegance of the Universal, because the Universal movies are much more mythic. This is cruder in that, but I do like it.
Although,
there's room for both.
They also start with really striking leading ladies in their pictures as well.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think people can attest that that's also a Hammer.
Yeah, that's true.
Hammer
Although
glamour.
less here than in the vampire movies. Well, they'd only had one vampire movie so far, but I mean, they got one lovely lady in this one. They had two in Curse of Frankenstein. Frankenstein is such a megalomaniac that, I should say a monomaniac, that he's not that interested in girls, and so there isn't a lot of. This is a very tiny cast.
I think he's a lot more asexual in this than he is in Curse of Frankenstein. He's kind of lusty in Curse of Frankenstein.
That's true. No, it's totally.
I mean, he's
totally
going to have
true.
a kid in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
This one's
I mean,
just gonna make a lot of monsters.
I don't know if we're going to get to Horror of Frankenstein. In Horror of Frankenstein, he's a perv, but we don't have any of that going on here. So, um, wow. Well, we should probably wrap up and get our final thoughts, and then get over to endorsements. I think we went Tony, Julia, Drew, and
Oh, you
then
started
whatever I
you
have
started with
left.
me this time.
Oh, was it you? Okay, so it was Julia, Tony, Drew. All right.
Not that it
So,
matters.
Julia, final thoughts. Revenge of Frankenstein.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun talking about it. I think, I'm like I said, I'm kind of reeling both from he's both his monster and the creator of the monster, and also from seeing a mouse run across my living room. That's kind of freaked me out a little bit. So I'm feeling a little on edge now, frankly.
At least it's not a rat.
Sorry? At
least
least no, it's not a rat.
Or a
It's very
bat.
small.
It's
very
not a
small
bat
little
either.
mouse.
Yeah.
No, it's not a bat. Thank God it's not a bat. That story was, ugh, I can't even imagine that one. Although I have been in a room with a bat that was not healthy, which was terrifying. But anyway, so but it wasn't in my house, which that would be much worse. But yes, I think that it's an interesting film. I think it's an interesting character of the Doctor, and also if you can call it the monster, the Carl 1 and Carl 2. I like I said, I think I'll probably forget this film pretty quickly, honestly, except for a couple of little moments. But it wasn't bad, and yeah, I like the color, like you were talking about. I think it's neat. The woman is completely inconsequential. She has no point in being in this film at all. The ingenue, whatever she is, the
Sure.
young assistant, she was completely useless, as is often the case with women in these movies, which, as a woman, is disappointing. I'd like to see a character that was actually of substance, but
Weren't you a
maybe
candy
next time.
striper at some point?
What?
Didn't you help out at a hospital at some point?
I was a candy striper, yes, but she's not a candy striper. She's like the receptionist / like everything.
She's handing out cigarettes and candy. I mean, she's
yes, but she also is the receptionist. No, I did. My dad was a doctor and is a doctor, retired doctor, and I worked for him in his office, and I got to do I basically did what she did, which is just kind of a little bit of everything. And then at some point I was the candy striper. Literally, I wore like red and white striped outfit and handed out Jello.
You heard it here first. You said she did what she did, so you helped make monsters. Is what you're saying. I
will neither admit nor deny helping to create monsters.
You did exactly what she did. Help make monsters.
Yep. Exactly.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, Tony. Final thoughts. Revenge of Frankenstein.
I actually kind of had more fun talking about this movie on the podcast.
Watching
this movie. And it's got a lot of, like I said, they did some really interesting things with how the monster is portrayed, and his kind of really harrowing experience, kind of being, for a brief time, kind of a superhuman once he recovers, but also briefly due to all the problems, and his horror at becoming something new and then reverting back to all the things that he disliked about himself. There's a lot there that's only dealt with a little bit that I think is really interesting. I think it's an interesting movie, and I'll watch anything Hammer, and I'll get to that in my endorsements as well. I think it's got a lot of good bits, but overall it's kind of cold to me in general. It's not my favorite, that's for sure. But I'm glad we're watching this. I mean, part of what's cool about these retrospectives is everybody, not everybody's seen every movie, and I think revisiting it, definitely, this is one I know I've seen parts of it, but I definitely hadn't revisited it, and I don't even know when I first saw it. So this has been really cool. It's not one I feel like rewatching a ton. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Monsieur Drew, what are your thoughts on Revenge of Frankenstein?
I think I've come around to liking it a bit more from this discussion. I still think it's one of the lesser Hammer films. I know that might be disappointing to you, Jason, but I'm glad that I have it in my catalog. I don't know that this is going to be one that I rewatch the way, say, I really like Frankenstein Created Woman. I like Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell. I like Curse of Frankenstein a lot. This is interesting. It's not perfect, but that's okay. That's okay. It's still worth seeing, and I'm glad that we did it. It was interesting to go directly from Curse of Frankenstein into this.
Yeah. Does that leave me? Did we hit everybody? So my only thought here is I'm kind of enjoying this so much that I'm trying to decide, and I'll talk to you guys about how much of this Frankenstein set do you want to make it. We could make it a mega Frankenstein set and hit all the Cushing ones, or we could just hit one more and try to choose which one it is. I remember that some of them are really interesting and some of them are not very good, and I can't wait. And I think, but the thing is, because looking at them side by side and allowing them to compare and contrast, sometimes even if they're not very good, Tony said something similar. I get a lot out of looking at them again. So, I was really excited to take a look at this film again. It just reminded me of why I fell in love with Hammer horror in the first place. So, that worked great. Let's do endorsements. Julia, do you have anything to share with us this week?
Oh my gosh, I just discovered, it's nothing to do with horror movies, but I just discovered The Crown on Netflix, which I'm sure I was behind on, and I was just so excited to see that.
You're not behind,
Matt
it just
Smith...
started.
No, oh, did it? Oh, I
Yep.
thought it was, because they've already got a whole series, so I thought that had been coming out, but I guess they just uploaded
Netflix,
more.
so it just all comes out at once.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's got Matt Smith in it, which I was super excited about. I love him, from Doctor Who fame, of course, and what'd you say, Jared Harris, is that his name? Jared Harris?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right, Jared Harris.
No, it's got a really good cast. John Lithgow is in it, and I like it. We already watched just the first two episodes, and it's very, very cool. I wonder. I'm really curious what the Queen thinks about having a show about her. Sophia and I were deciding that maybe she was a Time Lord, and so, because she liked Doctor Who, so she probably was like, I really like that show because it's about my people, and now she's like, this one is about her life, so I don't know if she liked it or not, but anyway, because she's kind of immortal,
You're asking if the Queen likes the TV show The Crown?
I'm wondering if the Queen likes the show about herself, her life.
That's a good question.
And, but anyway, Sophia and I were theorizing that she might be a Time Lord because she has lived so very, very long.
It's a hell of a good question. And it's funny seeing those films. We were talking about this earlier, seeing the films of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth and how tiny she was. I mean, the actress who plays Queen Elizabeth in the new show, Claire Foy, who is a petite actress, nevertheless is not as tiny as the actual Elizabeth II. That girl was tiny, and they put this big ass crown on her, and they're like, look, we got the smallest appropriate crown for your coronation, and it is huge, and she's got this cloak on that is just this monstrously heavy coat, and the weight of the crown is physically present at this coronation. It's astonishing. I've always been kind of stunned by those films. So it's kind of cool to see this miniseries going over all of that. Yeah, cool stuff. Tony, do you have anything for us this week?
Actually, I think it's kind of cool. I saw this movie because you could see it on Shudder, which you can get a la carte through Amazon. So I'm doing a free trial of Shudder to kind of suss that out. So, and there's a lot of really great horror on there, I've discovered. and they're also doing a pretty good job of picking things up in the same way that Netflix will do a Netflix thing. Shudder is doing that. So I find that interesting. I'm not, time will tell if I keep the trial. But the cool thing is, if we're coming up on Thanksgiving break. If you actually get a break, you can, and you want to turn Thanksgiving into horror Thanksgiving, as one is wont to do. maybe not. You can get a trial through Amazon, through your Amazon account, and check it out. And I think that's really cool. There's lots of stuff up there. I doubt if I don't keep it, I'll be sad somewhat, because I definitely won't get around to watching all the cool horror that I would want to watch, given how much time I have available in my day. But yeah, I think you should at least check it out. There's a ton of good movies, and I was able to see this movie through that. There's lots of Hammer, lots of just really obscure, weird stuff. There was one that just looks so bizarre. And I was going to point it out to you, Jason, just because it's so weird. I think it was called, Mama Dracula.
Yeah.
Or something like that, if I remember correctly. And it's just, I just kind of thumbed through it, fast forward and saw a bit.
Wait, are you talking about the movie with Sylvia Crystal?
Maybe. I can't remember offhand, but that seems about right. But it is the parts I just caught through were just crazy. But there's a lot of, weird deep cuts.
All right.
So I think that's really cool.
No doubt.
So thanks, Shudder, for sponsoring this week's viewing, in the hopes that also, I'll have to check through, but it's worth it. I mean, you really should give the trial a chance if you like this podcast and like what we do. There's lots of stuff and lots of weird deep cuts, and then, and we're not sponsored really at all, but I like what I see, so there you go.
Yeah. Although I've actually interviewed those guys, the people who designed that service. I'm glad to hear that it's going well. Mama Dracula,
really cool.
1980 Belgian film, oddly enough starring Louise Fletcher, who you'll know from Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. She's the one who makes it. She's the one who survives all night, if you recall.
It's a weird one, though, and I thought of Jason because I was this is a strange deep cut.
You had me a Belgian vampire movie. Honestly, that's all I need. I mean, you realize our next series, after we're done with Frankenstein, which we can stretch out as long as we desire, but our next series is going to be sexy vampire movies. So we're getting back to that. Can't wait. All right. Thank you. Drew, do you have any recommendations for us?
Well, it's definitely not obscure, but it was a movie that did actually kind of got bad reviews and didn't do particularly well at the box office. But I caught The Legend of Tarzan over the weekend, and I found it to be pretty. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good, and it won me over on two big points. One, it really bucked the trend that we saw with the Green Hornet movie and the Lone Ranger movie, where they revive an old-time hero and turn them into a buffoon. They played Tarzan, straight. They didn't make him a jackass. He still, got all the traits that we associate with being Tarzan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot, actually.
Yeah, and the other thing that I really liked about it is that it actually had something to say. It talks about racism, it talks about colonialism, it talks about nationalism, which is all stuff that's part of both our national and international conversation right now. It was neat to see a pulp movie or a superhero movie or whatever, an adventure movie or whatever you want to call it, that actually was addressing these sort of things in a way that, it didn't detract from the fact that, it was an action film, but in ways that actually stayed with me after I was done watching it. And I wish it had done better. I liked what they did with it. It was respectful yet modern, and I think this is an underrated movie this year.
I'm totally down with that.
I haven't seen it, but it sounds a lot like The New Adventures of Tarzan, which was a serial that Edgar Rice Burroughs was involved with, and he objected to the way that Johnny Weissmuller was playing Tarzan. And so what he did have the power to do was to mount a competing production that had a smart Tarzan who wore like a suit and stuff like that until he had to go back to the jungle. That was how it worked in New Adventures of Tarzan. And this, I haven't seen the new movie, but it sounds like
it's worth it's out on Redbox. It's worth I'm not sure if it's streaming anywhere yet, but it's worth getting at the Redbox, definitely, for the price. I mean, some of the CGI is wonky. There's some stuff I didn't think was perfect about it, but again, it actually had something to say, which is you don't see that very often. And it's saying something that we need that needs to be said right now. And look, I'm going to get up. I wasn't sure whether I was going to do it, but the other thing I wanted to talk about, this isn't so much an endorsement, but if I can segue from talking about what I was talking about under this, I'm sure most of the people listening to this saw the video of the quote-unquote alt-right, but we'll just call them Nazis, having their little soiree in Washington, D.C. this last weekend. This isn't an endorsement so much as a request of the people who listen to this podcast. If you care about if you care about this country, if you care about the world, get online. It doesn't matter if you make people uncomfortable. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care about any of that stuff. This is a bipartisan issue. I don't even understand why we're pretending like it's anything but a bipartisan issue. Get online and say that this is not right. Get online and say that this is not an American value. It's not a human value. And we need to send these people back to the scrap heaps of history. We need to send them. The Nazis should only be talked about in history books and in pulp novels, and that's
KKK.
it.
Nazis and the KKK.
Yeah, literally, like we have a hipster-fied version of white supremacy going on right now, and a Nazi in a nice suit, a Nazi dressed in a quote-unquote quirky T-shirt or whatever, that's still a Nazi. So,
and the KKK is actually still the KKK. I mean, they're doing celebratory parades in the whole getup.
Well, I think these guys are more dangerous. I really do, because they've somehow been able to bamboozle the media and bamboozle a lot of people into thinking that there's something they're not. And I just actually had like a lengthy conversation on Facebook where I had to pull out all the stops to convince a few people that it wasn't satire. And it's like, this is not Blazing Saddles. This is America in 2016, and these are Nazis. So let's do something about it.
I mean, there's a guy raising his hand in the air, and they said that's just exuberance. And if that's your show of exuberance, maybe you should pick a different show of exuberance.
Yeah.
I don't think we should condone that as a sign of exuberance. I don't think maybe that's the one.
But
if that's your go-to,
I get that
perhaps bad.
I get that people feel like they don't have what they need or what they want out of life, but it is not the fault of Jewish people. It's not the fault of immigrants. It's not the fault of Muslims.
This is not the way. This is not the way.
Well, it's the fault of lots of different things, including the fact that 80% of us are splitting 7% of the wealth in this country, and so there's a lot of issues that aren't about other groups of people that are not like you. I mean, that's just that fear of difference is so tragic to me. I saw a wonderful thing just now, actually, that said that if Trump's government requires that Muslims register as Muslims, that we all should register as Muslims, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah,
I love
there's
that.
a lot of
And
things that were that. Anyway,
I
there's a
don't
lot
want
of
to turn this
stuff
into a
that's
show.
like that.
I don't want to turn this into a show about politics, but to me,
Yeah.
this is beyond being.
I'm fairly
political.
apolitical in my especially like I will have a discussion personally. I don't really like discussing politics online or with my band, or even though sometimes entertainment is a way and art is a way, and by no means should art not use your First Amendment rights. Art should do that, but again, like I mean, I do have to cooperate with Drew in that, like I said, I just kind of saw this. I missed this over the weekend. I've been working just nonstop. But when I see somebody giving a Heil Hitler hand gesture as it goes beyond exuberance, and perhaps that's not what we should be doing. That should not be your go-to.
Yeah.
And if we condone that as a go-to, I don't know where we're going. Like, yeah.
Like I said, I think this is just common sense. We just stand together as people, as Americans, and say this is not okay. Denounce it. This is a no-brainer, and I like. It's strange to me that we even have to discuss it. But from fake monsters on the movie screen to real monsters in Washington D.C. Sermon over. All I'm saying, get online, talk about this. The way the alt-right became powerful is on social media. We can take them down, starting on social media and into the real world. Sermon over.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, I think that I agree completely. So if you want to turn that into an endorsement, it's be on the lookout for this crazy-ass speech that happened in the past week, and be on the lookout for more of it. It's amazing. My endorsement is really lame compared with calling out Nazis. Yeah, you know what? I don't have anything. So, I had something, but it's actually I'm going to leave it there. I think that was a good message for us, and I'll get back to lesser stuff next week. So, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed tonight's show, be sure and let your friends know about this series on Frankenstein that we're doing. Come to the Facebook page, engage with us, argue with us. We will absolutely engage back. We kind of really enjoy it when people leave reviews or let us know what they're thinking.
I do find it interesting that you keep going back to the arguing, because that's not something I enjoy.
Well,
we
I mean, actually,
don't really have that many arguments on our
I can't
social
even think
media.
of one.
Well, I would
to be honest with you,
that's what I'm getting at. I would like it to stay that way. This is me personally.
it actually hasn't happened. But if you were to say, "Hey, I think that you misread something," I would totally. And there have been times when people have said, "Hey, Jason, you mentioned such and such happens, but in fact, this happened the year before." So I've occasionally had gentle corrections, which I thought were absolutely fabulous.
That's nice.
So
I
yes.
personally will say that I do not enjoy arguing on the internet. I think staring at the wall or contemplating my navel or just hitting myself in the face with a phone is more enjoyable than arguing on the internet. So Jason will engage with you if you choose to do that. Don't expect me to.
Yep.
I'll tell you
No, but Tony will engage if it's not arguing. Let's put it this way: if you want to gab about the movie that we're discussing, we will totally gab with you. So
I can agree with. Let's talk about movies and awesome stuff, because the world sometimes is not the best. But we all love horror movies. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, and let's do that.
Well, if you don't love horror movies, my God, why have you been listening to this?
No, exactly. But let's be civil and be cool to each other, because that's and talk about that kind of stuff, because that's really why I think we do this podcast.
I do have a request, though.
And for those 2 hours or whatever, and then however much time we spend on the internet, let's be cool to one another and share a love of the things that we love. How about that?
I can't
That's
say
my
anything
that's
beyond
that's
that.
I'm
I think
I'm
that's
gonna
good.
go with that instead of arguing, and then you choose your own adventure, people of the internet.
I think that's beautiful. We should leave it there. All right, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and look for us Stitcher, Bleeding Cool, HorrorMovies.net, iTunes, wherever you want to find us. We'll be there. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Later.